It was supposed to be another quiet morning inside Iron Vale Prison, a fortress of gray concrete surrounded by razor wire and fog. But at exactly 6:47 a.m., a scream tore through the silence. Not just any scream, it was the kind that makes even the toughest men freeze. Officer Leon Vega was patrolling cell block C when the sound ripped through the corridor. He stopped dead, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The scream came from cell 312. When he peered through the narrow slot in the steel door, the beam of light caught something wet glistening on the floor. For a split second, his mind refused to process it. Then the shape came into focus, a body sprawled on the concrete, surrounded by a dark pool that soaked into the cracks like spilled ink. Code red. Cell block C. Cell 312. Vega shouted into his radio, his voice cracking. Within minutes, the corridor filled with boots, radios, and chaos. The body belonged to Derek Shaw, 35, a convicted armed robber, serving 15 years. Inside Iron Vale, he was known as someone you didn't cross. He ran protection, trade, and fear. But now, the man who once ruled this block lay dead, eyes open and glassy, staring at the ceiling. When Dr. Nora Hayes, the prison's chief medical officer, arrived, she knelt beside the corpse, pressed 2 fingers to the neck, and shook her head. "He's gone," she said quietly. The wound across his throat was deep, clean, and deliberate. Estimated time of death, between 10 p.m. and midnight, she added, standing up and removing her gloves. Warden Carter's face turned pale. "That's impossible. Night rounds were done at 9:30. He was alive then." "Who was his cellmate?" a voice asked. "Eli Turner," Vega replied. "Kid's in for burglary. Works the laundry shift. He came back around 11:30. The warden frowned. "So, Shaw was alive at 9:30, and Turner came back at 11:30. He glanced toward the ceiling cameras. "Check the footage." Another guard swallowed hard. "Sir, cameras on C block have been out for 2 days. Maintenance still hasn't fixed them." The words hung in the air like a curse. By the time Detective Dana Ruiz arrived an hour later, the hallway smelled of bleach and tension. Ruiz had handled enough prison murders to know they rarely made sense at first glance. Still, something about this one felt off, too quiet, too clean. She stepped into the cell. The walls were covered with crude carvings, names, dates, fragments of Bible verses. 2 bunks, one low, one high. The bottom one soaked in blood. "Who found him?" she asked. "Officer Vega," said Carter. "Anyone else enter before medical arrived?" "Just me," the warden replied. Cellmate was escorted to isolation. Ruiz crouched beside the body, studying the angle of the cut. Left to right. Sharp object, likely improvised. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. When she turned, she noticed something small, a single droplet of blood smeared across the upper bunk rail. The kind of detail that didn't belong to panic but to proximity. Whoever was up there had watched it happen. Ruiz looked up at the camera dome, hanging lifelessly in the corner. "Convenient," she muttered. She opened Shaw's locker. Inside, a Bible, a couple of tattered photographs, and a folded letter marked only with the initials E.T. "Who's E.T.?" she asked. "Eli Turner," Vega said quietly. "His cellmate." Ruiz's eyes hardened. She'd been here long enough to recognize the pattern. Young, good-looking inmates often became someone's property. Protection in exchange for obedience. She slipped the letter into an evidence bag and stood. "I want Turner in the interrogation room within the hour." As she stepped out of the cell, the corridor fell silent again. Guards avoided her gaze. Somewhere deep in the prison, a door clanged shut like a warning. Outside, dawn finally broke through the fog, painting the razor wire gold. But inside Iron Vale, everything remained gray, a world where loyalty, love, and violence all spoke the same language. Ruiz glanced back at the heavy door marked 312. "Whoever did this," she murmured, "knew him and hated him enough to make it personal." She didn't yet know that this single murder would unravel one of the darkest conspiracies in Iron Vale's history, a tangled web of forbidden love, betrayal, HIV, and corruption that reached far beyond cell 312. But by the time she was done, Iron Vale Prison would never be the same again. Detective Dana Ruiz sat across from Eli Turner in a narrow interrogation room where the air itself felt like it had been held too long. The walls were peeling, the metal table cold enough to fog with every breath. Eli looked nothing like a killer, more like a boy who'd been dropped into a world built to break him. His wrists were cuffed loosely in front of him, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Eli, Ruiz began softly. I'm not here to scare you. I just want to understand what happened last night. He nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing. I was working the laundry shift, he said, voice thin but steady. Didn't get back to my cell until around 11:30. Derek was already asleep. Or at least, I thought he was. You didn't notice anything unusual? Ruiz pressed. No smell of blood? No sound. He shook his head. It was dark. I was tired. I just climbed to my bunk and crashed. She leaned back, studying him. Eli had that fragile look, the kind of beauty that drew attention in all the wrong ways inside a men's prison. Too young, too clean-cut, too out of place. Tell me about your relationship with Derek Shaw, she said finally. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the one-way mirror before lowering again. He looked out for me, Eli said quietly. In here, people like me don't last long without protection. Ruiz's pen paused mid-note. Protection? What did you have to give him in return? His jaw tightened. You wouldn't understand. Oh, I do, Ruiz replied. I've seen it before. The trade, safety for submission. Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them away. He wasn't a monster, Eli said suddenly. He could be kind when he wanted to be. He taught me how to survive. Ruiz leaned forward, her tone lowering. Eli, surviving and loving aren't the same thing. Silence filled the room. The ticking clock became deafening. After a moment, she slid a photo across the table, a glossy image of Derek's body lying cold on the concrete. Eli flinched, recoiling as if burned. He's dead, Eli, Ruiz said gently. You were the last one to see him alive. Help me understand what went wrong. He swallowed hard. You think I did that to him? I think you know more than you're saying. Eli's breathing quickened. His cuffed hands trembled. You don't know what he was like when he was angry, he whispered. The night before, he stopped, shutting down. He what? Ruiz asked. Eli stared at the floor. Forget it. The detective's instincts kicked in. That hesitation wasn't guilt. It was fear, the kind that came from long-term control. When she stepped out in the hall, Officer Ryan Cole was waiting, arms folded. You really think the kid's capable of it? He asked. Ruiz studied him for a beat. I think he's capable of surviving, she said. That's different. Cole smirked. Don't let that innocent face fool you. Shaw treated him like a son one minute, a wife the next. The kid's been wrapped around his finger for months. She caught a flicker of something in Cole's eyes, resentment, maybe jealousy. Back in the evidence room, Ruiz reviewed the intake logs. No signs of forced entry. No noise complaints. The camera's still dead. A perfect blackout window for murder. But something about the timeline gnawed at her. Shaw's estimated time of death, between 10 p.m. and midnight. Eli had returned from laundry at 11:30. If Shaw had already been dead, that meant Eli had slept above a corpse for 6 hours without realizing it. Unlikely. Ruiz jotted a note. Either he's lying, or someone killed Shaw just before he came back. She flipped to Shaw's personal file. A disciplinary record full of assaults, fights, and manipulation. But buried near the bottom, one line stood out. Frequent medical visits, drive-in haze. The pieces didn't fit yet, but she felt the first edge of the puzzle click. Medical records. Power. Sex. Control. Ruiz returned to her office, poured herself a cup of stale coffee, and stared at the clock. 3:12 p.m. The same numbers as the cell. She took it as a sign. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking down the barred windows. Somewhere in the bowels of Iron Vale, Eli Turner sat alone in a holding cell, humming softly to himself, the kind of hum people use when they've already accepted their fate. And Detective Ruiz, though she didn't know it yet, had just opened a door into a secret world where lust, fear, and survival were more powerful than any prison lock. The next morning, Detective Dana Ruiz found herself standing in the sterile, overbright infirmary of Iron Vale Prison. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence, and the faint smell of bleach clung to every surface. Behind a cluttered desk, Dr. Nora Hayes looked up from a stack of files, her expression polite but guarded. "Detective," she said, adjusting her glasses. "I heard you wanted to speak with me about Mr. Shaw." Ruiz nodded, setting her leather folder on the counter. "I need his medical file and his cellmates." Without hesitation, Dr. Hayes reached for 2 manila folders and slid them across the desk. "You'll find everything there." But she hesitated, tapping one with her pen. "There's something you should see." Ruiz opened Derek Shaw's file. Blood work reports, notes from checkups, and, at the bottom, a page dated March 12th. In bold red ink, HIV positive. For a second, Ruiz's pulse quickened. He knew. Dr. Hayes nodded grimly. "Yes. I informed him 5 days before he was found dead." "What was his reaction?" Ruiz asked. The doctor leaned back, her voice low and steady. At first, denial, then rage. He said it was impossible, that he always used protection, that he was the one in control. But he wasn't. Not really. Ruiz frowned. "What do you mean by that?" "Power dynamics inside prison are complicated," Hayes replied. "Even men who think they're in charge often aren't." Derek Shaw had many relationships, some consensual, some not. But he fixated on one man after he got his diagnosis. Ruiz looked up sharply. "Who?" "Officer Ryan Cole." The name hit like a gunshot in a closed room. Ruiz had already sensed the tension in Cole's eyes, the discomfort whenever Shaw's name came up. Now she knew why. "You're saying a correctional officer had a sexual relationship with an inmate?" Ruiz pressed. Dr. Hayes met her gaze evenly. "I'm saying rumors spread fast in places like this. But I also handle the staff's medical screenings." She hesitated. "Cole is HIV positive as well." Ruiz exhaled slowly, the air thickening between them. "Does he know that Shaw knew?" Hayes shook her head. "I don't think so. I never disclosed anyone's private status. But I suspect word got around. Inmates talk. Guards talk. Secrets don't stay buried long in Iron Vale." Ruiz flipped open Eli Turner's file next. "And what about him?" Dr. Hayes sighed. "Tested negative. Both times." Ruiz raised an eyebrow. "Both?" "Yes. His first test was on March 6th, clean. But 6 days later, the same day I told Shaw about his diagnosis, Eli came back asking for another test. He was pale, shaking. He begged me not to tell anyone." "Did he say why?" "He said he just wanted to be sure." "I thought it was anxiety." Ruiz's pen stopped mid-stroke. The timeline was collapsing in on itself. Shaw learned he was infected on the 12th. Eli got retested that same day. That couldn't be coincidence. "Doctor," Ruiz said slowly, "could Shaw believed Eli infected him?" Hayes nodded. "That's what I thought too. He screamed at me before he left the infirmary. Said he knew exactly who did this to him, that he'd make them pay." The detective's mind started racing. If Shaw thought Eli gave him HIV, that could explain the anger witnesses reported, the shouting in the mess hall, the threats. But there was one flaw. Eli had tested negative. Ruiz closed both folders. "I'll need copies of these records and any sign-in logs from the night of the 17th. As she turned to leave, Dr. Hayes spoke again. "Detective, there's something else you should understand about this place." Ruiz stopped in the doorway. "This prison runs on silence," Hayes said softly. "Everyone's protecting something, a deal, a secret, or their own survival. Don't assume anyone here is innocent, not even the ones in uniform." The warning lingered long after Ruiz stepped back into the corridor. She passed a guard escorting a shackled inmate, the sound of chains clinking down the hall. Inmates stared at her through narrow slits in their doors, their eyes sharp, knowing. By the time she reached her car, the puzzle had only grown more tangled. A dead inmate, an HIV diagnosis, a guard with a matching secret, and a young cellmate who claimed to know nothing, yet somehow had been tested twice. Ruiz gripped the steering wheel, her mind looping through possibilities. This wasn't just a crime of rage or jealousy. It was something much larger, a secret network built on power, sex, and fear, hidden behind Iron Vale's concrete walls. And if what Dr. Hayes said was true, the killer wasn't the only one she needed to worry about. By late afternoon, Detective Dana Ruiz was back inside Ironvale Surveillance Archive, a dim room that smelled like old cables and dust. Rows of monitors flickered with grainy, silent footage. Hours of men pacing, eating, fighting, existing. Most of it looked meaningless. Until she found them. On one screen from March 5th, she saw Officer Ryan Cole walking briskly down the North Corridor. At first, nothing stood out, until a younger inmate stepped out from the shadows. Near the laundry doors, Eli Turner. Cole hesitated, looked both ways, then slipped the inmate something small, a folded packet the size of a matchbox. Eli tucked it into his waistband and walked away. Ruiz froze the frame. "There you are," she whispered. 2 days later, on another tape, Eli passed a similar packet to Derek Shaw in the library. A subtle exchange, like passing a note in class. Shaw pocketed it, gave Eli a brief nod, and walked off with the air of a man who owned everyone around him. Whatever this was, it wasn't friendship. It was business. She pulled another feed, dated March 7th. Shaw met with an older inmate in the laundry room, another package in hand. The two shook briefly, like businessmen closing a deal. Ruiz leaned forward, the glow of the monitor reflected in her eyes. "So, this isn't just about lust or jealousy," she muttered. "It's about money." When she left the archive, Warden Carter was waiting by the door, arms folded. "You've been in there for 3 hours," he said. "Find anything useful?" Ruiz nodded slowly. "I found your broken camera excuse doesn't hold up. Someone's been running contraband right under your nose." The warden's face darkened. "That's a serious accusation." "So, is murder," she replied. An hour later, Ruiz sat across from Eli again. His face looked paler, eyes sunken. He hadn't slept. She slid a still frame across the table, the image of him receiving the packet from Officer Cole. "Explain this," she said. Eli stared at it for a long moment before whispering, "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He took a shaky breath. "It started months ago. I was getting hassled in here, cornered, beaten. Derek stepped in, made it stop. After that, I owed him. When he said he needed help moving things around, I didn't ask questions." "What kind of things?" Ruiz pressed. "Medicine," he said. "Painkillers, antibiotics, sleeping pills. Stuff you can't get through the commissary." Ruiz narrowed her eyes. "You expect me to believe this was charity work?" "No," Eli said softly. "It was survival. Everything in here has a price." He said we were helping people who needed it, but it was always about control. Always. And Cole. Eli hesitated, then admitted he was the supplier, the guard who looked the other way. Sometimes he brought stuff in. Sometimes he just made sure no one checked our cells. Ruiz leaned forward. "So, the three of you, Shaw, Cole, and you, were partners." Eli's lip trembled. "No, I was the middleman. The kid who took the blame if it went wrong." Ruiz tapped the photo again. "And when Shaw learned he was HIV positive, everything changed." Eli nodded, tears glinting under the harsh light. "He went crazy. Thought Cole gave it to him. He started threatening everyone, me, Cole, even the doctors. Said if he was going down, we were all going down with him." Ruiz's tone softened, but only slightly. "What happened next?" "He started demanding more money. Said he'd exposed the smuggling. Said he had proof." Ruiz's mind replayed the image of Shaw's cell, the Bible, the letters, the scraps of writing. Maybe he really did have proof. When she left the interrogation room, Ruiz felt the full weight of Ironvale pressing in on her. The corridors seemed narrower, the faces of the guards less trustworthy. Back in her temporary office, she laid out the evidence in a clean line. Cole supplying medical contraband, Shaw distributing it through intimidation. Eli caught in the middle. Dr. Nora Hayes approving suspicious medication orders. A whole black market economy, hidden behind the language of care. Ruiz reached for her phone and called the state forensics lab. "I need a full audit on Ironvale's medical inventory," she said. "Focus on the last 6 months. Shipments, orders, everything." She hung up and rubbed her temples. For years, Ironvale had been a pressure cooker, secrets sealed behind concrete. Now it was starting to hiss, steam rising through every crack. In her gut, Ruiz knew the murder of Derek Shaw wasn't just a crime of passion. It was the breaking point of a deal that had gone too far, where loyalty gave way to greed and survival turned to silence. She looked out through the narrow office window towards cell block C. The sun was setting, the walls glowing faint orange. Somewhere in that maze of cells, someone was watching her, wondering how much she already knew. Ruiz straightened her badge, gathered her notes, and whispered under her breath, "All right, Iron Veil. Let's see who breaks first." The following day, Detective Dana Ruiz requested a private meeting with Officer Ryan Cole. He arrived in her temporary office crisp, as always. Uniform pressed, boots shined, face unreadable. But Ruiz could see it. The tension in his jaw, the nervous twitch in his left hand, the faint sheen of sweat even in the cold morning air. "Have a seat, officer," she said, her tone calm but heavy with purpose. Cole didn't move at first. "You could have asked for me through the warden," he said. "I could have," Ruiz replied, leaning forward, "but then I wouldn't have gotten the truth." That made him smile, tight, defensive. "Truth? In this place." She slid a still image across the desk. A grainy screenshot of him handing Eli Turner the packet in the laundry corridor. "Let's start here." His smile vanished. "You've been busy. Tell me what's in that package," Ruiz said. Cole hesitated. "Medical supplies." "Stolen ones," she corrected. "From Dr. Hayes's inventory. I know she signs off the orders, and I know you move them in. You and Shaw made a nice little business together." He sat back, jaw tightening. "You've got no idea what goes on here, detective. You waltz in for a few days and think you can untangle 10 years of rot. You're just scratching the surface." "Then scratch it for me," Ruiz said coolly. "Let's start with your relationship to Derek Shaw." That got him. A muscle jumped at his cheek. "There was no relationship," he said. "Not the way you mean." "Funny," Ruiz said, "because the medical files suggest otherwise. You both tested positive for HIV. Shaw learned that 5 days before his death. You want to guess what his last words to Dr. Hayes were? "I know exactly who did this to me." Cole's face drained of color. "That's a lie." "Then tell me the truth." He looked away, staring at the concrete wall as if it might swallow him. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. It wasn't supposed to happen. Back then, before all this, Shaw wasn't just some inmate. He was different, confident, untouchable. "You think guards don't get lonely in here?" Ruiz said nothing, just let the silence fill the room. "I was married once," Cole continued quietly. "Didn't last. My wife couldn't handle the job, the hours, the pressure. Then I got assigned to night duty, and that's when I met Shaw. He wasn't scared of me. Most inmates are. He had a way of talking to you, like he could see right through the uniform. And it turned physical," Ruiz said softly. Cole nodded once, eyes on the floor. "It started as control, a power thing, but he turned around. Before I knew it, I was the one sneaking him favors. Pills, food, little things. Then the pills turned into shipments. Dr. Hayes wanted a piece, and suddenly I was in too deep to crawl out." Ruiz folded her arms. "You kept it going for years. Off and on," he said, "until the new kid showed up. Eli Turner." Cole's mouth twisted at the name. "Yeah, pretty boy. Smart, too. Shaw took him under his wing, and that was it. He didn't need me anymore. Started ignoring me, talking down to me like I was one of them." Ruiz's tone hardened. "So you hated him?" He shot her a sharp look. "No, I pitied him. He thought he was running this place, but he was just another pawn. Hayes was the one with real power." Ruiz tilted her head. "So when he found out he was infected, did he come after you?" Cole's throat bobbed. "He cornered me in the infirmary hallway 3 nights before he died. Said he knew. Said I'd pay for it. But I swear, detective, I didn't give it to him. I've been on treatment for years. My levels are undetectable. I couldn't have." "And what did you do after that confrontation?" "I filed a report about the threat," he said quickly. "Check the logbook." "I did," Ruiz replied. "No such report exists." Cole's face hardened. "Then someone deleted it." Ruiz stood, pacing slowly around him. "Or you never filed it because you handled it another way." He slammed his fist on the table. "I didn't kill him." The outburst echoed off the concrete. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ruiz said quietly, "You may not have killed him, Officer Cole, but you helped build the world that did." She gathered the evidence photo, sliding it back into her folder. "You're suspended until further notice. Don't leave town." As Cole was escorted out, Ruiz sat back and exhaled. The pieces were shifting. Hayes, Cole, Shaw, Eli, all tangled in a web of greed and intimacy that blurred every line between victim and predator. And somewhere inside that mess, someone had finally decided to cut the cord. By the end of the week, Detective Dana Ruiz had hit a wall. Everyone she'd spoken to inside Iron Vale had given her some version of the truth, just never the same one twice. Officer Ryan Cole had admitted to smuggling and a past relationship with Derek Shaw, but swore he wasn't a killer. Eli Turner claimed to be just another pawn, trapped between protection and fear. Dr. Nora Hayes, for all her professional calm, knew more than she let on. Ruiz needed something that wasn't filtered through lies, something written, something Shaw couldn't take back. That's what she returned to cell 312. The blood had long been scrubbed from the concrete, the air replaced by the sterile scent of disinfectant. Still, the walls carried a weight, the kind that didn't fade with bleach. Ruiz scanned every inch, under the bunk, inside the thin mattress seams, even the vent. Nothing. Then she noticed the Bible on the shelf. The cover was cracked and stiff, edges darkened by years of use. Inside, the pages were filled with underlined verses, mostly about sin, redemption, and vengeance. But when she flipped to the middle, something slipped out. A folded letter, yellowed and creased, written in a bold, slanted hand. The first line froze her breath. "If you're reading this, I'm already dead." She unfolded it carefully, heart pounding. "They all betrayed me. Every last one of them. Nora Hayes, the smiling doctor who calls herself God. Ryan Cole, the coward who hides behind a badge. And Eli, the boy I actually thought loved me." Ruiz read the next lines aloud under her breath. "They think I'm too stupid to see it, but I've been keeping records. Every deal, every name, every date. Hayes signs the papers. Cole smuggles the pills. Eli delivers the goods. I built their empire, and now they're cutting me out." The handwriting grew shakier toward the end of the page, ink blotting from pressure. "I tested positive last week. Hayes told me. Said I should stay calm. Then I found out Cole's been sick for years, and she knew. She helped him hide it. Eli knew too. He's related to Cole, cousins. He wanted revenge. Wanted to make him pay. He used me to do it. Used my body to send his message." Ruiz stopped cold. Cousins? That wasn't in any file. She grabbed the prison personnel log and checked Ryan Cole's background. Born in Charleston, South Carolina. Then she checked Eli's record. Same hometown. Different last names, but the same mother's maiden name, Cole. Eli wasn't just a victim. He was blood. Ruiz's stomach turned as she kept reading. "I'm done being their puppet. I've written everything down, proof of their little empire. If they kill me, the truth won't die with me. The evidence is hidden where none of them will think to look." In the chapel. Third shelf, left side. Inside the spine of a Bible. Ruiz stared at the words for a long moment, then folded the letter gently and slipped it into an evidence bag. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the knowledge that she was about to open a door no one wanted opened. The Iron Vale Chapel was silent when she entered. Dust motes danced in the colored light from stained glass windows, depicting saints who never walked in places like this. Rows of wooden pews lined the narrow space, all facing a simple altar. Against the far wall stood a shelf filled with worn Bibles. Ruiz walked to the third shelf and ran her fingers across the spines. Most were falling apart, but one felt heavier. She pulled it out. The spine was slightly swollen, the stitching uneven. Using her pocket knife, she pried it open, and there it was. Folded notebook pages, pressed flat against the glue. Ruiz laid them on the altar and began to read. Shaw's handwriting filled page after page, a meticulous account of everything. Shipment dates, quantities of medication stolen, names of guards and inmates involved. Dr. Hayes and Officer Cole appeared again and again. But the final section made her stop breathing. Eli confessed. He said he wanted revenge. That Ryan hurt him when he was a kid. That he found out where Ryan worked, got himself arrested, and waited. He thought if I got sick, if I got infected, it would destroy Ryan's life. He said it was justice. Ruiz's heart pounded. Eli Turner had orchestrated this long before he ever entered Iron Vale. She read the final paragraph, the words like a dying man's curse. It's too late for me now. The virus is already in my blood. Maybe Hayes will kill me before I can tell anyone. Maybe Ryan will. But I've left them all a gift, a story that won't die when I do. Ruiz exhaled, folding the pages back together with shaking hands. She stood there in the chapel, surrounded by the echo of prayers no one believed anymore, and whispered to herself, Derek Shaw just solved his own murder. But outside that sacred silence, she knew the truth wasn't finished unraveling. Because while Shaw's letter named names, it didn't answer the one question that still haunted her. Who actually killed him? The letter had given her the motive, betrayal, fear, revenge, but not the hand that held the blade. And as Ruiz walked out of the chapel, clutching the Bible like a ticking bomb, she knew this case was no longer about one dead man. It was about the infection that had spread through Iron Vale long before any blood was spilled, an infection of corruption, lust, and power. And it was still alive. Detective Dana Ruiz didn't sleep that night. The discovery in the chapel replayed over and over in her mind. Derek Shaw's scrawled handwriting, the words they all betrayed me, and the chilling confession about Eli Turner and Ryan Cole. But the note didn't end with revenge. It ended with a location, a threat, and a prophecy. Maybe Hayes will kill me before I can tell anyone. At sunrise, Ruiz knew what she had to do. She arrived at Iron Vale's medical ward before the day's shift began. The long corridor smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol and rot. Fluorescent lights flickered weakly above rows of metal cabinets and locked drawers. At the far end, Dr. Nora Hayes was bent over a chart, her white coat perfectly pressed, her composure as flawless as ever. "Detective," she greeted without looking up. "You're here early." "So are you," Ruiz replied. Dr. Hayes smiled, thin and controlled. "I couldn't sleep either. This whole ordeal has been, well, exhausting." Ruiz studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "I know about the contraband ring, about the stolen medication, about the deals you made with Officer Cole." For the first time, Hayes looked up, not angry but amused. "Those are serious accusations." "I've got evidence," Ruiz said, dropping a folder onto the counter. Inside were copies of Shaw's hidden notes from the Bible. He documented everything, every shipment, every payment, even your role in covering Cole's HIV diagnosis. The color drained from Hayes's face. "Where did you get that?" "In the chapel," Ruiz said evenly. "He hid it where no one would look, in God's house." For a moment, neither woman spoke. The hum of the lights was the only sound. Then Hayes sighed and leaned against the counter, her mask of calm slipping just enough to reveal something darker beneath. "You don't understand what this place does to people, Detective. Iron Vale eats you alive. The system underfunds us, underpays us, ignores us. You think I wanted this? The drugs? The deals? I was just trying to survive the same as everyone else." "Survival doesn't involve murder," Ruiz said. Hayes's eyes sharpened. "So that's what you think, that I killed him?" "I don't think," Ruiz said, stepping closer. "I know. Officer Vega saw you near cell 312 the night Shaw died. He opened the door for you. You told him it was a medical emergency." Hayes's voice wavered just slightly. "That man is lying." "Funny," Ruiz said, "because he also told me you were shaking when you came out, said Shaw was asleep and not to disturb him. Then you went home and never came back until morning." The doctor swallowed hard. "You can't prove any of that." Ruiz opened another folder and laid out photos. The recovered shiv, a thin blade wrapped in cloth, the blood-stained mattress corner, and a fingerprint pulled from the handle, Dr. Nora Hayes's. The air seemed to collapse in on itself. Hayes stared at the photo, her lips parting in shock, then trembled as she whispered, "I didn't mean to kill him." Ruiz didn't move. "Say that again." Hayes sank into her chair, hands clutching the edges of her coat. "I want to talk to him," she said softly. "He'd been threatening me for days, said he had enough evidence to destroy my career. He wanted money, more pills, even a recommendation for early parole. I was desperate. I offered him everything I could, but he just laughed." Her voice broke. "He said I was next, that he'd tell the warden I infected the prison with lies. Then I saw it." "Saw what?" Ruiz asked. "The knife," Hayes whispered. "It was under his mattress. He called it his insurance policy, said it used to belong to Cole. He bragged that he'd use the guard's own weapon if it came to that. I reached for it without thinking. I just wanted him to stop laughing." Ruiz's jaw tightened. "So you slit his throat?" Hayes shook her head violently. "No, I didn't plan it. It was one motion, 1 second, and then there was blood everywhere. He tried to say something, but it just came out as gurgling." She covered her mouth, shaking. "I told Vega he was asleep because I couldn't think. I just wanted to get out of there." Ruiz circled her slowly. "And you never went back to check? Never tried to report it?" Hayes's voice turned brittle. "Report it? To who? The warden who takes kickbacks from the contracts we steal from? The guards who buy silence with pills and favors? I knew the system would bury me before it buried him." Ruiz stood in front of her, eyes cold but steady. "You buried yourself the moment you picked up that knife." Hayes looked up, eyes glistening with a kind of madness, half guilt, half relief. "Maybe I did. But tell me, detective, was I the only one? Everyone in this place kills something: hope, love, integrity. I just did it faster." Ruiz didn't answer. She reached in her coat and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Dr. Nora Hayes," she said quietly, "you're under arrest for the murder of Derek Shaw." Hayes didn't fight. She stood, extending her wrists like someone surrendering to gravity. As Ruiz fastened the cuffs, the doctor whispered, "You know, he deserved it in the end. He infected everyone he touched, not with disease, but with himself." Ruiz stared at her. "No one deserves to die like that." As they walked down the corridor, inmates banged on their doors, shouting obscenities at the sight of the prison's own doctor in cuffs. Hayes didn't react. She kept her eyes ahead, walking with eerie calm, like she'd finally escaped something only she could see. Outside, the winter light hit her face through the barred window, pale and cold. For a fleeting moment, Ruiz saw not a monster, but a woman broken by the same system she'd helped poison. Still, it didn't change what she'd done. By the time Ruiz handed her off to the transport officers, Iron Vale was already buzzing with rumors. The doctor in chains, the guard suspended, the young inmate in tears. And as the gates slammed shut behind a patrol van, Ruiz whispered to herself, "One killer down." But Iron Vale's infection runs deeper than blood. Because even now, she knew, the real story wasn't just who killed Derek Shaw. It was what turned all of them into monsters to begin with. A week later, the iron gates of Iron Vale prison looked different. The air outside still carried that mix of rust and damp concrete, but something beneath it had shifted, like the whole place was holding its breath. Dr. Nora Hayes had confessed. The press called it the killer in the white coat. State investigators flooded Iron Vale, combing through years of falsified medical orders, stolen shipments, and falsified logs. It wasn't just one doctor gone rogue. It was an entire ecosystem of corruption that had thrived behind those gray walls. But for Detective Dana Ruiz, the work wasn't over. The paperwork was endless. The statements, the lab reports, the hearings, all pieces of a puzzle that would never really be whole again. She sat in her office, surrounded by evidence boxes. On one side of the desk lay the blood-stained Bible found in the chapel. On the other, a sealed envelope labeled Turner, Eli, sentencing review. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Eli Turner had been transferred to a different facility, smaller, quieter, safer. He wasn't being charged for murder, but he wouldn't walk free either. The prosecutors decided to add 2 years to his sentence for concealing a death. Some said he was lucky. Others said he was cursed. When Ruiz arrived to see him, he was sitting by the window in the visitation room, sunlight spilling across his face. He looked thinner, older, like time had scraped something off his soul. "Detective," he said softly, forcing a faint smile. Did you come to make sure I'm still breathing? Ruiz sat down across from him. I came to tell you the case is closed. Dr. Hayes confessed. Eli's eyes flickered. I figured she would. She never could live with guilt for long. Ruiz studied him carefully. You knew, didn't you, that she'd be the one to snap? Eli looked away. I knew everyone in that place was breaking. She just broke first. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a distant siren wailed, fading into the hum of the prison. Eli, Ruiz said quietly, I read the letter. The one Derek wrote. He said you told him about Ryan. What happened when you were a kid? Eli's jaw tightened. That wasn't supposed to be in there. He said you got yourself arrested to get revenge. Is that true? Eli let out a hollow laugh. Funny how revenge never looks like you imagine it. I thought I'd make Ryan pay, that watching his secret world collapse would fix something inside me. But in the end, all I did was create another version of him and Derek. He leaned forward, his voice trembling. Do you know what it's like to think you're finally safe, only to realize the person protecting you is just another cage? Ruiz's voice softened. Yes, I've seen it more times than I can count. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I didn't kill Derek. I swear I didn't. But the night before he died, he knew I'd lied to him. He said I was just like Ryan, manipulative, broken. He was right. I used him. I used them both. He took a deep breath, his voice lowering to a whisper. I thought revenge would make me feel alive. Instead, it killed everything left of me. Ruiz didn't interrupt. She let the silence do the talking. After a while, Eli looked up again. What happens to Ryan now? He's suspended, pending federal charges for contraband and misconduct, Ruiz said. He won't wear a badge again. But they can't prove he infected anyone. The evidence is too thin. Eli nodded slowly, eyes distant. He always finds a way out. He used to say the system protects its own. Ruiz leaned back. It doesn't protect anyone forever. He smiled faintly. Maybe not, but it forgets fast. Later that evening, Ruiz stood outside the prison, watching the transport van carrying Dr. Hayes disappear down the long asphalt road. Through the tinted window, she could just make out the doctor's silhouette, calm, almost serene. Some people called it justice. Others called it tragedy. Ruiz wasn't sure it wasn't both. In her final report, she wrote, Derek Shaw died with a secret in his heart and a knife at his throat. But the real weapon wasn't a blade. It was the silence, the kind that grows in places where people stop believing the truth can save them. She closed the file and turned off the desk lamp. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to exhale. But as she reached for her coat, her eyes drifted back to that Bible on the corner of the desk. She opened it one last time, flipping through the thin pages. Inside the back cover, she found something she hadn't noticed before, a final scribble in Derek's messy handwriting. In a place where everyone sins, forgiveness is the only rebellion. Ruiz traced the words with her finger. For all his violence and manipulation, Derek Shaw had understood something most people on the outside never would, that Iron Vale wasn't just a prison for men. It was a prison for their ghosts. That night, she drove home under a low, gray sky. Rain drizzled against the windshield like whispers. For a brief moment, she thought about leaving the job, about walking away from the endless cycle of cruelty and lies. But she knew she wouldn't, because for every Iron Vale, there were a dozen more. And for every Derek Shaw, there was another soul ready to trade love for power and power for survival. Ruiz looked at her reflection in the mirror, tired eyes, faint scars of old battles, and murmured, Justice isn't clean, but it's all we've got. As she pulled onto the highway, the lights of the prison faded behind her, swallowed by the rain. And somewhere deep inside those walls, in the echo of footsteps and clanging steel, Derek Shaw's story finally ended. Not as a tale of guilt or innocence, but as a reminder of what happens when love, corruption, and silence share the same cell. End of case file. The Iron Vale Murder, True Shocking Crime Vault.